So maybe politics can be healthy. Maybe. And if we get it right, well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Because also, if we get it wrong, Tapestry weaves together the threads of our struggles, doubts, curiosities, faith, joys, and hopes to create meaningful conversations that matter. You know those late night conversations that go unexpectedly deep? That's what we hope to capture with the Tapestry Podcast. And we want everyone to join in the conversation. Because when we are heard and valued, we can begin to believe we're loved. Welcome to the Tapestry Podcast. All right, hey everybody, this is the next episode of the Tapestry Podcast, and we are here with my friend Mikayla.
Hello.
And my friend Mwangi. And we're talking about politics. And we've been talking about whether or not we think politics can be healthy. And we first talked about in the first part in this series about what we see as some of the problems, like why are we the way we are? Why is it going this way? In the previous episode, just before this, we talked about maybe some of the solutions, how we can make it better, kind of on a big, like macro scale, but also like on our own individual scale as people of faith, people who are practicing some sort of spirituality. And in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of the stakes, like what are the spiritual stakes here? What can this mean for communities of faith and people of faith? So as we get into that, I guess the first thing I want to talk about again, just really, really quickly, is that in the first episode in this series, I talked about this Billy Graham quote where he said that he was very nervous about the idea of kind of a marriage between the political right and people of faith. He termed that as like a wedding between religious fundamentalists and the political right. And he said that the hard right, political right, has no interest in religion except to manipulate it. And I think in a lot of ways, a lot of us have been manipulated on any side by politics. So people of faith, people who are trying to be, our best spiritual selves have actually been manipulated by political folks. And that's not great. So I think there are implications for us in how we treat politics in our country and in our lives. And I think that Jesus had some things to say about this, or at least had some approaches to this that I'd like to talk about. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts, Mwangi or Haley. Haley's another host. I'm sorry, Mikayla. I'm just like used to saying it that way. It's been so many too. Haley's great. And she's going to be on some future episodes very soon, which is fun. It's exciting. Some thoughts from you guys on kind of like what are the implications here?
Well, just from what I've seen, which a lot of what my news sources is Instagram, so take this all with the biggest grain of salt you can possibly hold in your hands. I've seen a lot of idolization if we marry too much of religion and politics. And that is a major sin in the Bible. And that is something that I think we need to be super, super careful of when integrating religion into politics. And in my personal opinion, I think they should be left completely separate. I think those two things should be opposite ends of a conversation most times.
Yeah. And the dilution of both, right? So then taking, simplifying either, right? Just saying, again, it's very black and white, right? So it makes it easy to say, okay, yeah, like, again, we talked about in last episode, if you're in this part of political spectrum, it means you're this type of religious person. So I agree with that, but I also see this dilution, again, the dilution of both, making a complex issue politically, you dilute it by just saying, oh, it must come from this place, so this where it's evil, and vice versa, taking certain verses in the Bible and just using those and ignoring many others, right? And just being super simple and saying, yep, I got it all figured out, right? As long as a candidate comes to me and says they say this and they say this, I'm set for life. Even though they might not be solving any of my issues, right?
Yeah, I think that's good. The idea of idolatry. Wow, that's good, and I think it can be easy to see. Again, on any side politically, where we hold up a politician as someone to be revered or even worshipped, or maybe even as like a savior figure. Like, I think we've probably all seen this, like at least talk about it. Like, this is the person. And I've seen it on every side.
And in churches.
And in churches.
You've got some preachers who are demigods, you know, some of whose suit jackets are healing tools, right? And some snake oil salesmen that are up there in the pulpit. But the way they get there is by making themselves exactly what you're saying, Mike. This idea of like, only I can solve your issues, right? You're going to be lost without me, right? Nobody listens to you, right? So I'm here to make sure that they listen to you. So this capture, and then again, if you just simplify things, like, oh yeah, that's it. Like that's the dude. That's my dude, right? So whatever he says, he's got my back, without really evaluating whether that's the case. But you feel somehow that person resonates with you, right? More so than other people around you, which is sad if that's the case.
Yeah. I mean, I think if our politics were to become more healthy, both kind of on the like how the government functions kind of level, but also just the way we talk to each other and treat each other online or whatever, like I think that'd be good for everybody, right? Like, I think just about everybody would benefit from that. Like, the world would be a better place, I think. I think maybe not the two-party system. I think maybe they tend to thrive on the crises they can create. Like right now, there's something about the budget that's going on. Like it's like, if things were healthy, maybe they wouldn't actually do any better. But I think just about it would be better for everybody if we could. I mean, and I'm not just saying like if we could all just get along. What I mean is, if we could have like meaningful, genuine conversations with people that we have deep disagreements with, that we don't actually expect to change anybody's perspective, but to actually like learn from each other. Like Mikayla, you mentioned this earlier about specifically around gun ownership, right? You coming from a background of like not being interested in guns, or maybe even thinking that maybe people should own fewer guns or no guns, and being on that side, but knowing people who are like big hunters and outdoors people who want to own guns for those reasons, like, and that changing your perspective to some degree, right? Like, not that we would do it to only change someone's mind, but to be changed. I think that might be.
Yeah, I agree. Because that's how those conversations went. We never were disagreeing, saying like, oh, well, you're wrong for not wanting guns in your house, or you're wrong for wanting guns in your house. It's saying, I can see where you would want guns in your house because of your lifestyle that you live, versus me saying, I don't want guns in my house because I don't live that kind of lifestyle and I see no purpose for them being within my grasp. I think it has to come from a place of understanding the other person and understanding the issue versus trying to make it like an argument between two people. It's an argument with two people, and the issue being the things you're arguing against, not each other. Like I think if politics were to get healthier in between common people, we have to stop demonizing the other opinion, first of all. And second of all, we got to start genuinely opening yourself up to a new perspective, because that's the only way we ever learn anything, I feel like.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really good. Yeah, the idea of seeking to understand, not just to be understood, super important. Super important. I mean, obviously, we all want to be understood and known, and all of that. I totally. But when we seek first to understand, that opens up worlds of possibility.
But then you put politicians out the job, right? So it's a self-preservation thing. So if that happens, they wouldn't know. Some of them would not know what to do, right? And it would strip power from them, which is a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not feeling sorry. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I think there are other benefits, right? We would, like, I know there's, at least in my family, we've got, and maybe in your families too, like some wide-ranging ideas about politics right now, and some strongly differing opinions that have caused tension, quite frankly, in my family. Where like, I'm just not going to talk about that with somebody. And maybe that's the answer. It's like, you just don't talk about it. But I wish that we could. I wish that we could have a kind of calm conversation about some of those things. But I think at least with some folks that I couldn't do that. It wouldn't be a calm conversation, or it wouldn't stay calm for long. And it's not Thanksgiving yet, but we're moving toward Thanksgiving, and that's like the common time when people talk about the holidays, and you're going having those family dinners, and like you're just waiting for Uncle whoever to bring up the hot button issue, and mashed potatoes get flying across the place. But you know, what if we could? It'd be good.
We might actually get somewhere in politics, and with making the world a better place step by step, if we started hearing each other on both sides of the argument and coming to a common middle, I want to say, versus having those mashed potato throwing fights at Thanksgiving over small issues that realistically do not bother your specific sector of family within that current point in time. It's just to argue for arguing's sake. I feel like sometimes is another reason politics gets brought up in conversation. It's because someone is feeling a little feisty that day and they want to start an argument over something.
yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, Mikayla, you said in a previous episode about like on a college campus where people are like having these conversations. Sometimes it's like gets heated on purpose, right? Like they're actually there to argue. Like that's what they want to do. They want to argue. And what if we didn't come in with that perspective? What if we came in with, I want to understand, or I want to not make sure that I'm right, but to learn what is right. And there's a difference there. And I think if politics became more healthy, it would be easier to go into that mode rather than the like, I got to prove that I'm right and that this other person's wrong. Otherwise, I don't know. Yeah.
I think there's plenty of it. There are plenty of benefits. I think that the challenge is, okay, so what are the tangible steps to get there, right? What's next, right? Like, so what do we do, right? Maybe it's more fireside chats with people, right?
Yeah.
So laying out tangible things, how people can get connected, could be the next step. And saying, so how do we get there? Otherwise, it remains abstract. Right. And all that, it's happened before, right? Politicians do like visit the constituents and do town halls. That's one way of connecting, or at least making sure if you're the politician, like do you really, are you hearing from your people? Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So they're there. So sometimes it's maybe even just not amplifying, but just taking what's there and just kind of doing more of it. That's all, just take that and do more of that thing, right? And make it normal, right?
Well, and like what you just said, if that were to happen, like that would be so good for folks who are unhoused. That would be so good for kids in the foster system. That would be so good for single moms who are trying to raise kids. That would be so good for the people who aren't at the top, who don't have all the power. And those are exactly the people that in most faith traditions, and then certainly in the way of Jesus, like that's who you have to take care of. When you look at the Old Testament and the New Testament of the Bible, take care of the widow and the orphan and the foreigner in your land, the people who don't count, who aren't considered important by the important people, by the people who have power. That approach, the approaches that you guys are talking about, like that would help those people. That would be spiritually significant, I think.
Yes, it absolutely will be.
Yeah.
100%. I also think that if we want it to be more of a healthy conversation, we stop making it so black and white between, well, this is obviously like a left issue, or this is a right issue, or this is a Republican issue, or this is a Democrat issue, and instead start making it like a people issue. If we take the sides, like the two sides of politics out of the conversation and just look at it as an environmental issue or a financial issue, an economic issue, we start looking at it for what it is versus who's bringing up the issue, I think we would get a lot farther in hearing opinions about it, because you're not assuming that it's coming from the other side or the enemy or whatever, and maybe hear it as another person coming to you with a different perspective on something that you didn't normally think about.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I love so much about Jesus. And as you read the Gospels, this kind of happens again and again. And like, because things were different then, and we don't necessarily recognize what was political then versus now, you don't always catch it, right? But like, he got asked political questions all the time, or at least questions that touched on politics or the politics of the day. Because a lot of the kind of religious life and political life was so intertwined in lots of ways. So he was getting asked these questions all the time, and people were always asking him to come down on like one side or another. And he didn't avoid that, actually, but he also didn't just do what they expected. He almost always elevated the conversation. People were expecting him to take one side or another and be like somewhere in here. And he always like moved the conversation up here somewhere. And the people were like, whoa, like I haven't thought of it that way. That's why, like, number one, that's why they wrote down all this stuff. And I think it's also one of the reasons they killed him. But he didn't seem to feel the need to simply take sides. Sometimes he did. Sometimes he said, no, no, I think this is the right way, and that's the wrong way. But he so often, it was like people were thinking in black and white, and Jesus was thinking not in grays, he was thinking in full color, in like a million billion colors. And people were like, wait, oh. Or like people were thinking in 2 dimensions and he was thinking in 4, right? Like he just always kept on changing the game. And I think I would love to be able to be that kind of person too,
But I was going to say, and in addition to what you're saying, things were political then, things are political today. That doesn't go away, right? This idea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Again, institutions or countries or states, provinces, whatever you want to call it, trying to govern themselves and also stay alive, right? Whether it's the politicians staying alive, whether it's the party staying alive, whether it's the governmental entities trying to stay alive, right? It feeds on itself, and once it's established, it's like a plant that needs to be fed. But the question is like, what do you feed it though, right? What exactly are you feeding it to grow? Necessarily.
That's good.
And so again, spirituality plays a part of that because, again, historically, the church has been political, right?
Yeah.
The church has been political and has influenced politics, right? And sometimes there has been a blur between those two things, right? The Pope has been, right, a political figure in history. So the church has directed politics. Has that gone well necessarily? No, right?
Not always.
No.
Not always, right? So
landslide.
Pretty much, maybe never. I'm not sure.
Exactly. So whether politics is the horse and religion is the cart, or vice versa, this thing is going in multiple directions, right? And so how do we create those boundaries to make sure like they're staying in their lane, right? And it's hard, right? Easier said than done. But I think coming back to the conversations that Mikayla was talking about, so how do we keep it local, maybe start one-on-one or like a small group of people talking, right? Sort of small group kind of thing. And then almost ignore the larger stuff, right? Because sometimes the people who are talking about, oh my God, there's a problem everywhere, are just BSing, right? They're just trying to create stuff, right? Trying to create drama, just like in social media. Like I'm always making fun of my wife when she watches Real Housewives. I'm like, these people are just creating drama to like create drama because they're friends, they're dramatic, and they're friends, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they yell at each other, and they cry and hug, and then guess what happens next episode? They're gonna yell at each other, and they cry, and then they're gonna go on vacation, yell at each other again, right? So it's just like drama for the sake of drama. But like you said earlier before, some of them just want to be seen. They want to be talked about. It doesn't matter if it's negative or it's positive. They just want to be in the headlines, and that's what feeds them.
Yeah.
Right? So what we do is ignore them, and sometimes that's the worst thing to do to a person who has ego is ignore them, right? Because not even debate them, like ignore them. Ooh, you really get them.
Oh, that's good. And that takes a certain amount of, I don't know if humility is the right word, but like, it's the person who has at least the right kind of or degree of humility who doesn't have to be in the headlines, who doesn't need to have that kind of attention. And I feel those are the people who actually get stuff done because they're not worried about looking like they got the thing done. They're worried about actually doing the thing. And we need more of those kinds of folks pulling the reins of power,
Yeah, I was going to say, we should leave the drama to the reality show people, because they do it best. Maybe keep drama out of politics. That's my
At least you know what
opinion.
you're watching, right? At least you know what you're watching, right?
They're all kind of making up arguments, even though they're all friends. It's just to keep themselves relevant.
Yeah.
But they're not, they're not trying to pretend to be anything else, right? They're genuine to themselves. Which is totally fine. I was having a coffee with a friend this morning, and we were talking about some politics, and he told me about a practice he's done now. Because remember, we're talking about phones, so he's trying to disconnect, or he's disconnecting. So what he's done is he's gone old school. He's subscribed to a bunch of magazines, okay, that come to his home. So he's like, okay, instead of trying to scroll on my news app, I'm just gonna read it. And his point is, he gets, even if it's a summary article of what's happening about the Tylenol, it's long form, and it's written in a manner that gives. I'm not going to talk about say both sides, but it gives you what's happened. So his point is like, if I did just in the long form and away from the screen, his point is like the screen, right? So like actually pick it up and read it. He said it's been a lot healthier. And then also, he's subscribing to a bunch of different magazines. So even the act of sitting on his porch and reading a physical thing is super healthy, right? Versus reading that thing on a screen. So I was like, man, like, you're right. So, like, he was telling me about his son getting excited about Scientific American magazine, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's cool.
That's great.
Like, and so that's a thing. Right? If you have roommates, okay, people can start picking up magazines. So my point is, we're still getting informed. We're still interacting with information and learning. But man, these apps, dude, like they're bad. It is like a medicine, right? So in the health and safety world I work in, there's a saying by this doctor back in like the 1600s. He says, everything is a poison. It's the dose that differentiates a poison from a remedy.
Yep.
Right? If you take the medicine and you take too much of it, it becomes a poison. If you take the right amount, it's a remedy, right? But everything can be everything is poisonous. Not by nature, by him saying that is it makes you be cautious off the bat. And then say, what am I doing here with this thing, right? And it may
what's
be
the
this
dose?
thing for what's the dose, right? Because what is am I getting the right dose? And the dose could be different for everybody, for different people, right? But it's clear that sometimes this dose is being adjusted not by us, right? How that tech is giving us that information, we're not calibrating it. It's just coming. And you're like, what? Then next thing you know, it's 3 hours doom scrolling. And you're like, what? The sun went down? Right? Right? And it's the dose, right? Because, but you just become addicted. So I think maybe even putting it away and feeding that hunger in a different way, conversation, coffee. What we did today, we're actually going to meet virtually, but he's like, no, let's have some coffee and walk around Wash Park. I was like, that's a great idea. And then we did it. We walked around. I'm like, oh man, we need to do more of this, right?
Yeah.
Instead of even catching up virtually.
Real human connection. Maybe that is part of the solution, and maybe it's also a benefit of the solution, if that makes sense. That is, we're not divided. And that's, I think, maybe see if I can find it quick. No, I'm not going to try to find it. I'll just say that it was, I believe it was Martin Luther King Jr. Quote that I read recently, talking about how, like, really we have to recognize that we're all one. He put it as that we're all children of God. And of course, he was talking about in the context of what was happening in the 1960s and with race in America. But I think it's so much deeper, right? There are more layers, and I think Dr. King would agree that the things that divide us are actually so small, and the deeper reality is that we're all one, that we're all one family, all one people, all come from one spirit. And so, I guess my hope is that as we realize that, it would help to make our politics more healthy. And then as our politics become more healthy, it's easier for us to recognize that in each other, recognize the oneness of all people, of all things.
Yeah, I just think people who have opposing views should take a walk around Wash Park. I think that's the solution. You're forced to walk in a park and talk. And I think that will... You're not going to fix the world's problems, but I think it's going to be healthier if people do that kind of thing. You know?
And for those who are not from the Denver area.
Yeah.
or a park in Fort
City
Collins.
Park.
If you're not from the,
City Park.
Yeah.
City Park. And Wash Park is short for Washington Park here in Denver. Everybody here just calls it Wash Park. And it is beautiful. Did you go by the boathouse when you were there?
We were just talking so much. I didn't even know how far we walked in. We were just like, oh man, it's been like 2 hours. Like, dang, okay.
Yeah,
and we were walking. Everybody else was running. It's Colorado. So. And then we were not fitting in, right? Because we were like, oh, sorry. Anyway.
No, you just weren't getting passed by the walkers. You get passed by more runners.
Yeah. We were not. We didn't show up right, but now we know.
But now we know.
All right, guys. Well, I think it's a great spot to wrap up this episode and this series on whether or not politics can be healthy. We have hope. We have hope. I think I started off more pessimistic than I feel right now, even. So thank you guys for that.
Great conversation.
Yeah.
Great conversation.
Open-minded perspectives.
Yeah, it's good. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for viewing if you're watching. And we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
The Tapestry Podcast is produced by Stephen Bailey. Original music was scored by Taylor Martin. Various friends host this podcast along with me, Mike Orr. Special thanks to Lauren Richmond Jr. and Resonate Media. You can learn more about Tapestry and join the conversation on our Discord channel at tapestrytalk.org. Thanks for joining us.